So we're sitting here. Welcome to Facebook Live from the Raisina Dialogue. And I'm sitting here with the country head of the World Bank in India. And what we are going to be talking about today is essentially what is perhaps the most pressing problem facing the country today, namely exactly what are we going to do with our young people. And in a changing economic environment, one in which the question of jobs has become very politically charged, what is it that the World Bank can do, and more than that, what is it that state governments and the central government should be doing in order to ensure that India's population, India's young people are prepared for the future? And Junaid, I'd like it if you could just run us through, maybe over a minute and a half or so, what the World Bank's strategy is to help us with the problem, and in fact, what do you think the problem is as you see it?
No, wonderful. Thank you very much. Maybe we should begin by taking out the fear and the fiction from the facts. I think technology is changing. Everyone knows that. It's changing at an extraordinary fast pace. But there's a fear that this will lead to automation, robotics, and people will not have jobs. I think that we are overplaying that. Certainly technology will change the nature of jobs, but it will not replace jobs of people. So the question for me is not try to predict the future, figure out what to invest in today so we may be prepared for the future. And here, I think the nature of education has to change. And let me give you the examples. First, we did not worry about maternal health or pre-education or the prenatal era or the preschooling era. Today we know that the first 1,000 days of a child's life is extremely important. That's where the neurons get developed. That's where all the, if you will, basics for development happen. And even before that, to the zero, investing in mother's health becomes important.
I did sanitation and similar.
Absolutely.
Sort of community.
So the Swachh Bharat, absolutely needed. The ability to do early nutrition program, absolutely needed. But also stimulation after birth, but also pre-education. All of these today become investment in growth. Before we used to think of it as, the Minister of Education and his health is asking for more money for social services. Actually, today the conversation is the Minister of Health and Education saying to the Minister of Finance, how much economic growth do you want? I'll be able to give it to you because it's about early childhood. I think that's the first investment that needs to be made, and made consistently. Mind you, India has the world's largest early childhood program. India has the world's largest sanitation program. The issue isn't policy shift, the issue is implementation. So the second issue that I want to focus on is the nature of the life cycle of schooling. You know, we have this comfortable idea, you go to school for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, and then you go to the job market. It's changed. Children will evolve into middle school, will go into skilling, will come back, will go to high school, will go into skilling, then come back for education. The ability to move back and forth between skilling programs, job market, and schooling has to now become the norm, right? The third thing, which is extremely important, is the notion that government does everything. The government will provide the schools, the government will provide the teachers. Today, and Delhi is a good example, non-state actors are doing extremely well in creating schooling programs. So this is what you have is private NGOs and others taking over public schools and teachers and creating a completely different environment for service delivery. So we have to experiment with different service delivery issues. The final point I would make, we mustn't forget India is a federal system. Goa is different from Bihar. You have to empower the states and their capabilities to innovate and then learn from there. It's no longer the world of central planning and top-down planning. It's about bottom-up, citizens' feedback, and getting states and local governments to respond.
So wonderful. So there are, I think, three things there that I'd like to sort of take the conversation forward around. The first is this notion of essentially, and I don't want to use the word phrase continuing education, but it's like, let's say, a permanent educational status. You're
Absolutely.
always a student, and you're then beyond a certain point, you become a worker.
That's right.
Now, two things about this, I think, are maybe difficult for us to manage in India. The first is that it is a notion that we have that their education has a purpose. And the purpose of education is to eventually earn money, all right, and to get a job. And once that purpose has been fulfilled, you are in a different stage of life, as it were. So there are the stages of life that you move between. You're telling us, in fact, that this is no longer how we should be thinking about education at all. So isn't that a sort of social change almost? So how do we change people's minds about what their lives will look like?
And you've just, I think, beautifully articulated the challenge. We worry about the future of technology, worry more about changing minds today. And what you have said is exactly right. Purpose of education is about creating constant learning. It's about creating the skills to adapt. As change happens, you adapt. It's about the EQ, not only the IQ. How do you work with other people? How do you collaborate? What kind of skills do you bring in which you contribute to teams? Those are the skills and qualities that today job markets are looking for. And in fact, it's very interesting. If you go to some of the top IT schools that are teaching the young generation to take on IT programming for the West, you know what they do? They actually teach you how to engage with the West, how to talk to the West, if that's where the market is.
You know, to tell you the truth, my personal belief is that a lot of younger people have figured this out. In some sense, when you hear about it, you read about how English language classes take off across Tier 2 India. You know, we tend to think of this as, oh, this is just a skill, all right, they're only learning a skill. It's not just that. There's, the English language classes in a Tier 2 town in India are skill, etiquette, deportment,
there you go.
Confidence. There's this entire package of things that a friend of mine says that actually the purpose of education now is to distinguish yourself from a machine. And but then again, Indian education has traditionally, turned us into machines.
But it's changing.
It is changing.
It is changing. I think if you look at the ground reality, because of the demands from citizens, you're seeing different types of innovative schools that are emerging. The key question to me is, can state governments and their capabilities change to respond to that demand? No, the usual story is, there they go again from the World Bank saying, let private sector come in. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying invest in the state so the state itself has the capability to be flexible to respond to the type of demand.
Or to monitor the private sector as it were, because
at a minimum.
It's if you have private sector participation, it does not necessarily mean that the state has to do less. Sometimes the state has to do more.
Exactly.
Okay, I don't want to take too long on this, but Junaid, if I was to ask you, and there'll be a lot of young people watching this, if they were to come to you and say, look, I'm 15, I'm 16, I'm 17, how should I be planning my life? All right, and how should I be planning my education, and what should I think about when I'm deciding what to do now that I'm in class 10, class 11, class 12? What kind of advice would you be giving them?
Good grief, I don't know if my son would say I've given him the right advice, and you're asking me to...
Children never believe that
their parents give.
Have got...
Look, I think for the young generation, they have to recognize a few things. One is your parents' dream, you enter one job and are there till you retire, is long gone. Expect to shift jobs at least 4, if not 6 times, which means learn what adaptability means. Learn the skills that allow you to move from one job to another. Plan to move from one job to another. So when you enter a job, figure out what is the learning that you'll get from that job so it prepares you to take on the next job. The other thing that which you mentioned that I would suggest is figure out how a constant learning happens, right? So do not hesitate in middle of a job to take time off to go into a skilling program, or take time off to go into an education program, or the continuing education, but defined very, very differently. Third is constantly think global. And when you think global, interestingly, your solutions are local. So coming up with that kind of a connection. And the final advice, which I tried to give my son but didn't work, do not fear to enter the world of politics. Politics needs young ideas, it needs fresh ideas, it needs bold entrepreneurs. Politics is how to change the world. You can't change the world without politics. Technology only takes you so forward so much. Be brave and enter the politics of India.
So there you are, technocrats telling us we need more politicians, perhaps better politicians. All right, so thank you all for listening to us from the Raisina Dialogue, and do keep on, do stay on our page. We have a lot more coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.